If I could please have a round of applause, a nice warm welcome for Sumitra Dutta.
Bonjour, good morning everyone. Okay, good morning everyone. Good morning, okay, good, we are live. I think Mark had a wonderful presentation. He covered a number of interesting topics. And what I hope to do is complement some of his ideas. And I have 4 questions that I wanted to focus on. The 4 questions really are quite simple. They are, how is the world changing around us? So what's happening in the world? How is innovation itself innovating? Because we see innovation changing today around us. What are some challenges faced by firms while trying to innovate? And finally, what are some implications for these changes? So, how is the world changing? Very quickly, I think our previous speaker already spoke about the dramatic changes in the world. I see that many of you in the audience are from Asia. If you travel to many emerging markets, you realize that there is no talk of recession. There is no talk of depressions. There is no pessimism in many of these markets. So we really are living today in at least a 2-speed world, and perhaps even a 3-speed world if you include many of the informal economy participants in many countries. But today we do have differences across regions in the global economy. Second, it's very important to understand that we are witnessing some kind of an expectations revolution. What do I mean by this? What I mean is, around the world, millions of people are now emerging from poverty. In China alone, more than 400 million people. In Brazil, more than 40 million people. In India, more than 150 million people. They have moved out of poverty. Now, as they move out of poverty, they want new products, they want new services, they want education, they want healthcare. And to provide these services for these emerging masses, you will need innovation because you cannot provide the same products or the same kind of service to these emerging masses because the price points, the affordability points are very different. The third point is technology. Technology today has become a very important driver around us, and we all realize the progress of technology is exponential. But we often don't fully realize how fast it is in relative terms. Now, this is a piece of research from an American thinker and philosopher called Ray Kurzweil, and he basically says that in this 21st century, we'll make progress equal to 20,000 years. Now, why 20,000 years? Because the rate of progress itself is increasing exponentially. Now, you can debate this number, 20,000, 15,000, 10,000, but these numbers are based on some formal models and research which he has done. And the key question really out here is that technology is progressing exponentially, opening up entire spaces of new innovation, while at the same time human beings and organizations often live and work in linear time. So there's a growing gap between the possibilities of technology and the capabilities of many in organizations and society to handle the new possibilities offered by technology. Now, we also see that sustainability is becoming a very key concern today. Today, at the current rate of consumption, if everyone in the emerging markets, Latin America, Africa, China, India, start consuming at the same rate or pace as citizens of Europe and America, we know that the earth cannot sustain it. So we have to be able to think about sustainability and think about redesigning a lot of our products and services to keep sustainability in mind. So once again, you see that innovation becomes necessary as a very important imperative for the future. Now, you also see that today, and this is very clear today in the world around us in Europe, there is some kind of a crisis in leadership. Leadership both in business and government. So you see this, that the traditional institutions, the traditional sources where people put their faith and trust, today are not necessarily delivering. People are creating new expectations about how will this new governance structure emerge? How will the new relationship between business, society, and government emerge? So once again, there has to be innovation, even at a very high macro level of structure in society, of interrelationships between business, government, and industry. Now, if you look at all these factors, what you see very clearly is that the world is becoming much more connected, much more interdependent, much more complex, at the same time, much more exciting, because there's so many more opportunities out here for innovation, for change, and for doing interesting new things. And there are emerging masses of people, millions of people who are eager to receive, to consume some of these innovative products and services. You saw some pictures of children in Brazil or in India or in China in the previous slide, and these people are absolutely hungry for new products, hungry for new services, but we have to innovate to create the right products and services for these markets. Now, let's move on to the second point in terms of how is innovation itself innovating, because our traditional notions of innovation are changing as we look at the new emerging world around us. Now, I have a few trends out here which I think is interesting and relevant for information. The first one is innovation is becoming horizontal, by which I mean that innovation is no longer restricted to the classical R&D technical function. Today, people are innovating in all kinds of related sectors, related functions in marketing, in business models, in society, social innovation. If you have gone to Peru, the South American country, it's a very renowned country for tourism, but today Peru has become the center of gastronomy in Latin America. And what has happened is two chefs, Astrid and Gaston, who studied in France, they went back to their country and they have created an amazing series of restaurant chains that have expanded globally, worldwide, by combining and researching traditional Peruvian cuisine and ingredients with some of the knowledge they learned in France, in the famous restaurants in France. Now, as a result of this, what has happened is they have created a renewed social pride inside the country. A lot of young people now look up to this new rejuvenated spirit of innovation in the country, and a lot of young people now aspire to become leading chefs like them. And there's a whole generation of chefs now in Peru who are leading a cultural revolution, a cultural innovation inside the country. And this has been amazingly powerful in giving pride to the country and inspiring people to even achieve higher results in different spheres of life. Now, innovation also has become global. This point was already emphasized very clearly in the previous speech, but in many ways what has happened is innovation has somehow turned upside down. Why? Because today a lot of innovations are starting in emerging markets and then moving to more developed markets. And this is the reverse of what used to happen before. Before, typically, innovation started in developed markets and then they were adapted and modified for emerging markets. Now, take the example of this car made by Tata. the car company in India, the Nano car. It's a car that cost only about 2,000 euros and is a car designed mainly for satisfying the needs of the emerging middle class in India. Now, today, the first export market for Tata Nano car is Europe. They are shipping the Nano car to Europe. Now, what is interesting also is that the Nano car is not just a stripped-down, simplified version of a regular 10,000 euro car. It is a car that has fundamentally new patents, about 100 new patents, new innovations that went into making the car cheap, reliable, trustworthy at a 2,000 euro price point. Now, increasingly also we are seeing that innovation is becoming social. What do I mean by this? What I mean by this is people are coming together and innovating in the way they live in society. Now, if you have gone to Estonia, it's a beautiful country in Northern Europe. There was a very famous campaign called Let's Do It that became very successful a couple of years ago. Now, what happened in Estonia is that when the country was under the Soviet rule, for some strange reason, the Soviets had left a number of garbage dumps around the country. And after independence in the early 90s, these garbage dumps kept multiplying. So people kept creating garbage dumps across the country. So at some point, a few years ago, people said, well, we have to stop this. We cannot just keep dirtying our country. So we have to clean up our country. And what happened was people came together. They, in fact, through a technology-based platform campaign, on one weekend, they mapped the location of the various garbage dumps. And 2 weekends later, in collaboration with the government and civic society bodies, they came and they, in fact, cleaned the whole country up, cleaned all the garbage dumps in the country. And this campaign became very powerful as an example of how society can self-organize to create change. And today, if you look at, for example, the Occupy Wall Street movements and so on, you see this kind of phenomena in which people are self-organizing to create social change. Now, you also see that the emerging hyper-connectivity in society around us is creating new spaces for innovative solutions. Now, one example is this experiment launched by the US Defense Department. So what they did in December 2009 to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the internet, they launched a grand challenge. They said, well, we have launched 10 of these red weather balloons across the country, so in 10 unknown locations in the US, and they said, can any research team or can anyone find the location of these 10 balloons? Now, if you try to actually program this mathematically, the mathematical problem cannot be solved. But the winning team from MIT solved the problem in about 8 hours' time. In 8 hours or less, they identified the precise locations of all these 10 weather balloons. Now, what they did was they had a very creative solution that employed and exploited the social connectivity that exists today in society around us. And this hyper-connectivity in society is enabling us to think about solutions differently. In this case, it was just 10 weather balloons. But the Defense Department is now looking at this very carefully to see, what if you want to identify a terrorist? What if you want to identify a missing child? Can you, in fact, use new techniques to solve problems in dramatically different ways and in ways that were not possible before? In business also, this is coming up, and people are connecting. Of course, the first connection you make is with your customers, and today, increasingly, companies are reaching out to co-create solutions. Now, one example of this is this company Netflix in America. And what Netflix did was, at some stage, they faced a problem. The business is renting movies online. And like many online retailers, what they had was mathematical algorithms to suggest to people what should be the next movie to rent. So which movie should you rent next? Now, they had algorithms and physicists and mathematicians working on this technical problem. And at some point, they found that they could not improve the problem solution any further. So what they did was they opened the problem to the whole world, and they said, well, can anyone out there, outside my company, help us in improving this solution? And they gave a prize of $1 million. And what was amazing was you had numbers of teams, large numbers of teams who came together and tried to solve the problem. And the winning team improved the algorithm by 30%. 30% improvement in the accuracy of prediction is a lot of money for them in this business. But once again, this improvement was achieved by going outside, by connecting to people outside the organization. Now, this is also creating the tendency towards creating strategic platforms for innovation. So companies are saying, well, why don't we think of a product or service as some kind of a platform on which we invite people to come and co-create value with us? Apple, Android, these are classical examples of this co-creation platforms. But even in the government service, what you're having now is a range of open government initiatives in which the government is opening up its data sources and inviting people to come and use the government data and create applications using the data for purposes that they feel is most suitable for their needs. So once again, you have this notion of governments, of companies creating platforms on the basis of the product or service, and inviting people into this platform to create new value. So a variety of things basically is happening out here, and we see the clear need to be innovative in the way we look at innovation going forward, because fundamentally there are new trends out here that will change the way we innovate going forward. Now, what kind of questions do companies face as they try to innovate? Now, the first question really is, we have a lot of bright people, but somehow we sometimes feel that they are challenged innovating. Now, this is a major issue because one can argue that all of us are born innovative. And if you have any doubts about this, just look at a 4-year-old child. Doesn't matter which country. Every 4-year-old child naturally observes, naturally asks questions, naturally experiments, and never stops experimenting, and also keeps on going to parents and brothers and sisters for advice, for help. These characteristics, observation, questioning, experimentation, a support network, are exactly what innovators do. So somehow, children are born innovative, but we lose that innovative streak sometimes in organizations. And a lot of it happens because we put tremendous pressures on efficiency. And efficiency creates routines. And this is a very delicate balance and challenge that we face at an individual level. The second point is very simple, is that our organizations are also not really designed for innovation. Now, this might seem like a dramatic statement, but really it is very true. If you think about a simple example, look at a simple product like a watch or a car. Most watches are quite similar, most cars are very similar. And if you ask the question, why does that happen? It happens because there is a very important notion of a dominant design. So usually what you see happening in business is before a dominant design is discovered, you see a lot of innovation in the product or the service. People are trying to discover what the product or service should be. The most innovative period in automobile history was the first 20 years of the last century, when we had more than 75 car companies in America alone. At some moment, someone discovers a dominant design. For a watch, it is that. For a car, it is the four-wheel closed steel body. And then the focus shifts from learning to execution. The focus becomes much more on process innovation. You know what a car looks like. Let's make it cheaper, reliably, high quality, as quickly as possible. And fundamentally what happens is the organization gets into execution mode. So what I would argue today is most of our organizations are designed for execution and not for learning. And this is what makes innovation fundamentally very difficult inside companies. Now you also see that our organizations are not designed for collaboration. What do I mean by this? Today, if you look at where do new ideas come from, and you can look at research of various kinds, new ideas increasingly come from outside the company. Customers, employees inside the company or business partners, but not your traditional R&D department. Now, a challenge for companies is how do you aggregate this input from a number of people across the world, typically outside your organization. And this becomes a very important challenge because the way we are designed to collaborate is for structured situations. You know, you have a supply chain. A company has a relationship with a supplier or a vendor. When you have structured relationships, companies can more or less collaborate okay. But as soon as you have more quasi-structured, semi-structured situations, as you saw earlier, when society, people come together in informal, unstructured groups, then institutions have a very difficult time collaborating with them. Think about the Occupy Wall Street movements right now. These are people coming together in a very loose, unstructured manner, and it is very difficult for business or for governments, for that matter, to collaborate with them. At the same time, this collaboration is very important to be able to innovate going forward. Now, we also see from research that innovations don't spread very quickly inside companies. So some research that has been done by one of my colleagues shows that companies take a long time to transfer innovations from inside the company, one department, to another department inside the same company. In fact, in this research, it took 41 months to transfer innovations. And the most interesting part of the research finding is that it takes 33 months just to be able to take a decision to transfer and adopt a best practice. Why does it take such a long time, 33 months? Because the simple reason is most companies don't even know what innovations exist in across the different parts of the organization. Pure ignorance. Companies don't know what is happening good and innovative inside their own organizations. If they don't know what is innovative, they face a tremendous challenge in transferring innovation to another part of the organization. Now, the last point out here really is that innovation is one part of the set of challenges that companies face. And clearly, in some sense, companies have to balance multiple pressures, efficiency, innovation, internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, to be able to successfully manage business and continue a sustained basis. So what you see is innovation in organization faces a number of challenges despite the desire and willingness to actually invest more in innovation. So what are the implications of all of this? I think some of the implications are quite evident. We are living in a new world. I think it's become quite clear. The new normal is here to stay. The world is a multi-speed world. Emerging markets are becoming much more innovative. And in this new normal, we have to be able to redesign our innovation processes redesign and rethink our innovation mindsets to be able to leverage the global ambitions, the global input that is possible, to be able to create new products and services that satisfy the demands and expectations of emerging classes around the world. And the last point really is very important, is we have to somehow make innovation a part of the DNA of our organizations. And doing that is not obvious because, as I said earlier, our organizations are designed for execution and not for learning. So you have to work at trying to really make innovation a part of the organization's DNA. So with those comments, thank you very much for your kind attention, and I wish you a very successful conference the rest of the day. Thank you very much.